Good evening, everyone. Happy summer. I now call to order tonight's public hearing for the Town of Los Gatos dated June 20. Madam Clerk, do you mind calling the roll today?
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Steve Leonardis. Councilmember Marcia Jensen.
Here.
Councilmember Barbara Spector.
Here.
Vice Mayor Rob Rennie.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Mariko Sayak.
Here. And so I have the great pleasure of introducing to you tonight one of my dearest friends, Tiana Torresillas. Tiana, do you mind joining us? So as many of you know, we begin our meetings with a Pledge of Allegiance, and we get to introduce a young member from our community. Today I'm introducing Tiana Torresillas to all of you. She is a fourth grader at Blossom Hill Elementary, and I have known her since she was in her mom's tummy, and over the years, she has done amazing things. She has been involved with the chorus at Blossom Hill. She's Girls on the Run. She's learning how to play the guitar. And her favorite subjects at school are PE, art, science, and reading. And in addition to all of that, she has wonderful community ethics. She has, for 5 years, worked on the One Warm Coat effort. She has been working on science fair setup. She has been doing Bible camp setup and organizing, and she's been doing clothing collection for Blossom Hill Elementary for the past 2 years. So do you mind leading us tonight for Pledge of Allegiance?
Please stand. Please place your right hand over your heart. Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated.
Thank you, Tiana, and thank you, Mrs. Torresillas, for bringing her. And as a reminder, we do have a block party as well as July 4th, and if you would like to see that fabulous outfit once again, I suggest you come and join us. Okay, tonight we do not have a closed session report, but I do want to introduce all of you to our Deputy Town Attorney, Lynn Lampros, who is joining us today. Thank you. And council matters. Since our last public hearing, is there anything council members would like to report? Councilmember Jensen?
I have nothing to report.
Okay. Since our last public hearing, town manager and I did meet with Superintendent Diana Abadi of Los Gatos Union School District just to talk about some recurring issues and better coordination and to continue that coordination between the two entities. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Since the last meeting on 6/7, I attended a LAFCO commission meeting where we heard a request for an annexation of property into the city of Montecito, which was denied based on a lack of progress annexing their county pockets. We also asked for info before approving a communication plan at LAFCO. On 6/8, I attended the Cities Association Legislative Committee and the board meeting. On 6/12, I attended the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority Risk Oversight Committee, where we evaluated our power purchase positions for the past month. On 6/12, Councilmember Leonardis and I attended the Finance Committee meeting where we reviewed and discussed IRS Trust 115 proposals. 6/14, I chaired the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority board meeting. We approved several policy updates, a salary increase for the CEO after his focal review, the formation of a finance committee, a strategic plan, but asked for more finance detail before reconsidering a policy shift for power purchase and related messaging. And we canceled our July board meeting and our June executive committee meeting. On 6/15, I attended the Silicon Valley Leadership Group's Economic Forum as a guest of the Cities Association sponsorship for that. 6:15, I met with LAFCO staff to discuss the communication strategy and plan. On 6/15, I did a ribbon cutting for the Butter Paddle. It's their 50 years supporting Eastfield Ming-Kwong, which is now called Uplift Services, which provides services for families and children in need. And I want to give a shout out to all the volunteers that run the store and make the support possible. Also that evening, I did a ribbon cutting for the Legacy Garden at Los Gatos Memorial Park on Los Gatos Almaden Road. I especially like the quote they put on the entrance to that garden that says, "The things you do for yourself will be gone when you are gone, but the things you do for others will last when you are gone." Something for everybody to think about. And I met with various citizens on several issues in the town.
Thank you. Councilmember Spector?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since the last meeting, we had a CDAC meeting, which I attended. And at that meeting, we considered a proposed mixed-use development, the location of the current post office.
Thank you. And Madam Manager?
Thank you. I have a couple of announcements. As the mayor mentioned, on July 1st, we're holding our first ever block party on Santa Cruz Avenue, so please come and have some fun with us. On July 3rd, the town offices will be open for regular business, but on July 4th, we will be closed, and that's a great time to join us at Oak Meadow Park for the symphony. And then I also have a presentation. We're doing our quarterly employee recognition, so I'll come down, and if the mayor could join me, that'd be great. Thank you. So tonight, it's really my honor and privilege to recognize our information technology team. So I'm going to invite Chris, Becca, and Tushar to come and join the mayor and myself. This small but very mighty team is responsible for all of the information technology for all of our departments. That means the critical services in our police department, the software in the library department, the ability for community development to issue permits, the ability for public works to respond to work orders like a downed tree, et cetera. So these three people make all of that happen. Chris has been with the town since 1989, so he's seen quite a bit and has many contributions to date. Becca's been with us since 2009 and has done fabulous work for us, now mostly focused in our police department. And Tushar's our newest member since 2015, and we just so appreciate all of your service to the town. We do have gifts, one for Chris, one for Becca, and one for Tushar. And if everyone could just please join me in a round of applause for the great work.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So we do have 7 items on our consent agenda. Just a reminder, items that are placed on the consent agenda are normally acted upon in one motion that usually leads to an approval. I have one item that has been pulled, item number 6. Council members, would you like to pull anything else? Okay, seeing no one else pulling that, I am looking for a motion for approval. Councilmember Jensen.
I move approval of the consent calendar consisting of items 1 through 7.1 and excluding 6.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? It passes 4-0 with Councilman Leonardis absent. Okay, we now move to item 6 that has been pulled. Ms. Peterson, hello.
Thank you. Hello. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Lisa Peterson, Town Engineer. In front of you, you have a report on OBAG funding for the town, which is One Bay Area grant funding from MTC, and it is the Cycle 2 funding that is coming before you tonight. So I actually don't have my presentation up there. We're waiting for the presentation to go up, if that's okay. However, we are requesting that the council authorize the town manager to execute and file an application for funding for the design of the trailhead connection from Los Gatos Creek Trail to Highway 9. Also to authorize the town manager to issue a request for proposals for this design, and also to adopt the resolutions for the two resolutions that are attached, which are required by MTC in order to obtain this funding. So just to talk a little bit about what OBAG is. OBAG is our One Bay Area grant funding that comes from MTC, which is Metropolitan Transportation Commission. And it is broken into two different areas. So we have competitive funding, and that's funding that towns and cities have to compete against each other in order to get. We also have a non-competitive component of this, and this is money that is formulaic. It is based on your population, and it is something that is just given to the town. So the town will be receiving $343,000 of this non-competitive grant funding from Metropolitan Transportation Commission. Now, MTC will allow us to use this funding for different types of projects. We can use it for design and construction, for streetscape, road maintenance, bike ped projects, transportation planning, safe route to school projects. So those are different types of projects we can use the funding for. Now, town staff, along with, is making a recommendation, and this was also supported by the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission and also by the Transportation and Parking Commission, to use the money that we are getting from this non-competitive OBAG grant for the design of the trailhead connection from Los Gatos Creek Trail to Highway 9. And there are some benefits for doing this. So a couple of those are that this project is already listed in Measure B. So according to Metropolitan Transportation Commission and VTA, they are looking to fund the projects that are listed in Measure B. That is their highest priority as far as distributing funding. They are also looking to distribute funding to projects that they consider shovel ready. What shovel ready means is it's a project that's already designed. So if we have a project that is already designed, is already listed in Measure B, we have a very high probability of receiving funding for that project. Now, additionally, this does allow us to leverage our town funds. That OBAG funding, the non-competitive, as I mentioned, would be about $343,000. We are required to have the matching funds for that, and those matching funds would be about $40,000. So $40,000 that the town would put in, we would receive the $343,000 from the OBAG Cycle 2 grant funding. We can use that money then to actually leverage and hopefully get possibly $3.4 million in funding for this connector trail project. Now, ultimately, until the project is designed, we don't know exactly what the cost will be, but I think the point is that we could leverage this amount of money, the town's funding of $40,000, into several million dollars. And this is just something to remind council about the project that you had previously approved to be listed in Measure B for the town's bike ped project. And it is a connection to Los Gatos Creek Trail from Highway 9, both from the east direction and also west on Highway 9. So there would be a connection from both locations. Now, additionally, the project would be providing some additional Class 2 bike lanes that would be going over the Highway 17 overpass. We'd be installing some ADA ramps with high visibility crosswalks at the freeway ramp locations. We would also be realigning that sidewalk on the north side of Highway 17 between the on and off ramps for better visibility. And this project would allow us to connect the community to the downtown, also would allow connectivity to Fisher Middle School and to the high school. Additionally, the Alberta Way project is proposing a number of bicycle and pedestrian improvements, including additional right-of-way to provide a bicycle lane in front of that project and improvements at the intersection of Alberta Way and Los Gatos Boulevard. And this would then again also connect into those improvements if those improvements were ultimately completed and that project was approved. And thank you very much, and that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Council, any questions? I'll go right to left. Councilmember Jensen, then Vice Mayor.
I have a couple, if I may. The first question is, I realized in your presentation you said that you don't know what it would cost, but $343,000 just for design indicates that it would be quite an expensive project. So what is the likely expense right now, either you or Mr. Morley, that you think it would be, given the pressures that we are now have and are soon to have on our town budget?
As far as the construction cost or the design?
To get it done.
I would say it would probably be in the range of that, of $2 to $3 million.
Okay. And as I look at the report and the OBAG funds, I understand that there's different things that you could use them for, and I think that creative minds could fit lots of things into those categories. And particularly, I'm thinking of safe routes to school projects, for example, Blossom Hill, Winchester, those areas that have been identified. Is $343,000 for design of a $3 million project the best bang for our buck?
It's certainly a way to leverage the money that we have. And additionally, as I mentioned, in order to leverage it, we want to be putting it towards the projects that MTC is giving the highest priority. MTC, through my discussions with them, has been pretty specific that they consider our Measure B listed project as, you know, top tier as far as receiving funding. And additionally, as I did mention, projects that are already what they consider shovel ready or projects that are designed.
So this project isn't designed. This request is for the design. So how does that fit in?
This request is for the design, so that would add an extra layer of it being a higher priority project for MTC to fund.
And those projects that are in this is my last one, in the bicycle and pedestrian map and the safe routes to school that have been identified, those are not in design, but they're described in the same way that this is, and one could certainly argue to MTC and Measure B that they fit within the Measure B language, not specifically listed, but they fit within the language.
Correct.
So why couldn't the council choose to pursue more than one project that we could actually complete?
The council certainly could. I did talk to MTC and VTA regarding priorities, and you know, they did say some of the other projects, you know, could also be prioritized as well. However, they would be more of a tier 2 level priority. Still, their number 1 priority would be our Measure B listed project.
Okay, sorry, I know I said it was going to be the last one, but it's not. Some of the things were identified in the Safe Routes to School report with costs that were less than $343. So couldn't we complete some of those projects without having to get matching funds?
And I believe that the council had previously put forth in the budget $300,000 in order to complete some of those that were listed in the Safe Routes to School. And so we are definitely going to be moving forward with some of those. But yes, I mean, certainly council could put the money towards what they would like.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. A couple questions. I guess the first one is, so there's $15 million in Measure B to redo this interchange. How do we match up with that? Are we coordinated with what I don't know what they're planning to do, but I'd hate to go spend $2 million and then they come and tear everything up when they redo that interchange.
I think that would certainly be something that we would be talking with MTC about and Caltrans during the design aspect of this project. It would certainly be a component to the design that we would be looking into, and to make sure that did not happen.
Second question. So I've been watching the OBAG grants, and Los Gatos is never on the list. Everybody else is getting grants. It looks difficult to get an OBAG grant. Why do we think we can get this one when we haven't been able to get grants in the past, basically?
So again, in discussions with MTC and VTA, they said that they are looking to fund the projects that are listed in Measure B. That is their highest priority. Additionally, they will give higher priority to projects that are shovel-ready or are designed. So we believe this is probably the project that would have the highest ability to get funded with Measure B for, substantial construction funds.
If I could add in just on answering that question a little bit more, the OBAG, so as Ms. Peterson explained, there's two sets of OBAG dollars, formulaic dollars and competitive dollars. This is the formulaic element. So these are dollars that are there for us to get, and they won't go to somebody else. So as long as we can meet the criteria for OBAG on the non-competitive side, the dollars will come our way. So we've done, Ms. Peterson's done a lot of work in back channels with MTC and VTA to ensure that we're compliant with their needs, and the conversations have been pretty in-depth to make sure that this project complies with that need. So we're very confident that this design element, the $343,000, will come to the town.
So if we're so good, why aren't we going after the competitive dollars instead of the formulaic dollars?
So the competitive dollars aren't out at this point. They will be in the future, and we will look at that. The competitive dollars have some other elements in them that make us less competitive, including the requirements for PDAs and for communities of concern. So it's a little bit different requirement. We hope to be increasingly in touch with grant opportunities as our transportation and mobility manager comes on board, and to really stretch where we're applying for grants and the dollars that we're trying to bring to the town. So that's one will be one of our focuses over the next year.
So I hear a suggestion potentially that we should move these dollars to some other Safe Routes to School project. How much is that going to change our competitive position on this?
So it will move us from having a shovel-ready project to not having a shovel-ready project. So we at some point may need to come back and do some design on this project, or the council could reevaluate the prioritization of this project in terms of where we want to go with it. The reason that we put forward the competitive, the moving forward with it in this structure is we thought for a small investment from the town's dollars of $40,000, we could potentially bring us to a position where we have that $3 million investment here for the town. Certainly, as Councilmember Jensen pointed out, we could use this for a number of other projects, including, as the staff report said, pavement maintenance or safe routes projects. The net potential on that is $380,000. So the 340 plus our match. So it's a $380,000 worth of project delivery versus the potential of a $3.4 million project. So that's where the leveraging comes in, and that's why staff's recommendation is as it is.
So one more question, maybe two more. I know this project is high. I recall students coming in, and maybe it was the youth commission coming in and asking for this one, and I was skeptical back then and have since come to warm up to this project, that it would make, I was thinking of people crossing the highway, but coming off of Los Gatos Boulevard, it would be a better connection. Can you remind me, was it the Safe Routes to School they were working on? Was this first choice or second choice? This was high on the choices for somebody. Was it Safe Routes to School? Was it the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan, or was it something from the Youth Commission?
I think it was the Youth Commission that was speaking, or active students from the high school that were speaking about the inability to have parking and to get to the high school. I think this is a first project in a what is a need for the corridor. So between this project and the improvements at the interchange and the improvements at Alberto, and then potentially future projects along that corridor as other properties may or may not develop, it starts to look like a first vital step in creating a plan there. And so that's sort of the long-term vision and why it made sense.
So one last question. So then, from what I understand, we are going to put in $40,000, and this would cascade through to get $2 to $3 million of Measure B funds, which require a 10% match. So we're using the OBAG. It looks like we're 10% matching OBAG in order to get OBAG, which then allows us to 10% match the Measure B. So if we sent our OBAG funds somewhere else to get this done, we would now have to come up with $200,000 to $300,000, whatever the right number is, $200,000 to $300,000 in order to get the Measure B funds to do this. Is that correct?
Yes, so we would ultimately have, if we wanted to try to have the project have higher priority and be shovel-ready, then of course we would need to come up with those funds ourselves to fund the design.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, because this item has been pulled, I will open public testimony. Our first speaker, Angelia Dorner.
Angelia Dorner, proud resident of the Almond Grove. I don't need to repeat all of this because Lisa already went through this particular thing, but I wanted to say that at the January 31st priority study meeting, there were two different line items, the bicycle and ped master plan, as well as safe routes to school, as well as a different thing for the traffic commission. And there was a lot of confusion. I think about almost all of you had confusion over what belongs where and was it duplicative or not, et cetera. So at that point, I think the clarification was somewhat made that the safe routes to school was definitely safe routes to school, bike and ped, and the other thing included much more substantial projects, which is the bicycle plan. Then you go to February 7th, 1 week later, where you guys discussed Measure B priorities. And Highway 9, this particular thing was listed as number 4 out of a list of 13 that the staff had provided. At the conclusion of that session, the number 1 and number 2 items that you guys said were priorities was school busing, bike and ped improvements, which I took to mean safe routes to school, hiring that staff person. 3 out of 5 of you said the roundabout. 3 out of 5 you said traffic signal update. The only person who said anything about the Los Gatos Creek Trail was Mr. Rennie, who asked about it, and Mr. Morley had indicated that parents in Almond Grove had asked for that because they wanted access to Fisher. Well, no, what they asked for was from us all. And we have Miles, and we have the connection at Miles and the trail. So anyway, there really is nothing. In fact, he said in the priority part that although it's listed in the minutes as this being one of his priorities, he actually said that he did not believe it should be number 4 on the list. Where it was number 1 was in the bicycle pedestrian master plan. And as you notice here in the one chart, table 4.1, in the column that says improve safe routes to school access, there is not a check mark in the section that relates to this particular improvement. In addition, the Safe Routes to School plan does not include this, but it does include Highway 9 in Masal as well as Highway 9 in Los Gatos Boulevard. Also, we have Miles at the trail connector so that people from the Almond Grove, if that's the point, could go through there. One thing that I'm extremely concerned about is that in the resolution on attachment 2, the project is defined as the entire project. It is not defined as design of this project. And so if you notice in red, this is regional discretionary funding, and it cannot be expected to be funded with additional regional discretionary funding. Wouldn't that apply to the $3.4 million of Measure B kinds of funds?
Thank you, Ms. Dorner. Council members, any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Our next speaker on this, Peter Hertan.
I am Peter Hertan. I'm a member of the Los Gatos BPAC and the VTA BPAC. I'm the town representative. So it is a difficult decision, and I know we all struggle with how do we prioritize this over all the things we could use the OBAG money for. So I'd like to remind everybody that we are very unlikely to qualify for the competitive OBAG money because we don't have a PDA, which many other communities do, so we never qualified. So this is one of the rare times that we have non-competitive money opportunity. Yes, it could be used for other than Measure B qualifying funds. Obviously, we want to take advantage of the leverage if it makes sense in a project on its own. And I'd like to speak in favor of why it makes sense to be a project on its own merits, as opposed to because it's funded potentially by Measure B. I live on the east side of Los Gatos, and I'm a very active bicycler. I've been bicycling for commuting for a long time, and I am very concerned about going on Route 9 in passing over Highway 17. So yes, it's a very valuable question to say, will this be coordinated with the redesign of Highway 17 entrance? And obviously, we would expect that part of the criteria of the design would be to make sure it's coordinated, along with the design activity that is part of Alberta Way. So I see this as an essential element to making Highway 9 safe as it transitions around Highway 17. You also see that there's a very active use of a dirt path that was informally created along the slope from Route 9 down onto the Creek Trail, which means that it's dangerous because it's a quite slopey road, as well as homeless encampment. So it's not something that we want to encourage anybody to make use of, which is the alternative to a formal project. So I want to say I support it because I see it as a safety measure. It meets the requirements of connectivity for the county, which is the essential element of qualifying for Measure B funds. In addition to being shovel-ready, it has to enhance connectivity if it's a bicycle and pedestrian project. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Hertan. Our next speaker, Bob Burke.
Thank you for having me. I'm Bob Burke. I live on at 420 Alberta Way. I was involved in the Alberta Way project that was referred to earlier, and I just wanted to say that that project was actually denied by the Planning Commission, and the Town Council will hear it in another couple or 3 weeks when you have it rescheduled. And if we could get the, you're the town engineer, right? If you could put your drawing back up that showed the intersection and the path, I noticed something in the drawing that I'd like to comment on.
Mr. Burke, what we'll do is, so that we don't use up your time, I will ask our town engineer to do so, but, oh, it's up, okay, got it.
And
She
if I
beat
could
me.
step over there and speak loud, would it be
Can you
okay?
please take the microphone with you?
Sure. Okay, I'm curious if I can ask a question about this path here.
During your time, yes, and
Okay.
then when we close it, we'll see if we can come up with some answers.
So for the town engineer, what's this one doing here in the first place? It requires a bridge to be built over the culvert and is just about the most expensive connector that could be built to access the path instead of just doing this one. This thing having to build a bridge over here is really running up the tab. I walk this this intersection and this section of the road quite a bit. There's an existing dirt path that's used by all the people who want to cut through from 9 down to the trail, and simply turning that into something that's longer and built along the hill that was built as the base of the road would be a much more cost-effective design. And that's really all I wanted to talk about, besides ask the reason for the bottom path in the first place.
Okay, council members, any questions of Mr. Burke? Okay, during our discussion, we'll get your question answered.
Thank you so much.
Next speaker, Thomas Cook.
Hi there, Thomas Cook, Safer School. This seems like a no-brainer, so maybe I'm missing something, but I haven't seen an alternative presented to the staff's recommendation that this is the best use of the potential money. And it is on a variety of lists and has been, and it certainly enhances the utility of the trail, and we are incredibly lucky in this town to have that trail. However, it's not fully useful for students. This would help that. Eventually, we're going to regain the access through the lodge when you guys figure out how to make that happen with the new owners or whatever. And as Peter pointed out, people use this now, and it is ugly. It's ugly and scary and dangerous, but people are accessing the trail through there, so there's obviously a need. It seems like a very smart use of a small amount of money that could make a big difference. As Mr. Morley pointed out, it's a key link in enhancing that whole segment. Got to start somewhere. So I don't know. For what it's worth, I think it's a smart move. I'd love to see it happen.
It looks like you have a question, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Mr. Cook, you are, I guess, the heart and soul, the leader, citizen leader of Safe Routes to School. So I think the question was, should we spend money elsewhere? And I think I'm hearing you say this is as good a place to spend it as any to help Safe Routes to School.
Yes, it seems like, absent an other obvious choice, it seems like the money's there, the state of the project is there, the potential to leverage it is there. It does help with bicycle and pedestrian access and mobility around the town. It sounds like yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions?
Yes.
Councilmember Jensen.
So I'm not saying that this is a bad idea, but if I'm assuming that a remote possibility or maybe even a real possibility that the town is never going to get $3.4 million and cannot fund this project, would that change your opinion? So, for example, if the town could build out a full and complete bike lane on Blossom Hill to get to Fisher, which is not safe right now, or build out a bike lane or perhaps a sidewalk on Winchester, which people have come into the town and wanted. So if I think about a completed project versus a maybe project, then I'd want to know what your answer is with that in that respect.
Yes, and that's a good question. Nothing's a given. Whenever you go after these funds, you have to do a study. You guys know that. It's just the way government works. It drives me crazy. But you have to do the study, and without the study, you don't have a chance. What I seem to be hearing is this is a really good chance, and it's a relatively easy project to do a study on. It's been on the various lists for a long time. I don't know that there's any other obvious. All these other projects you mentioned would be awesome. I'd love to see them all happen. If we were comparing apples to apples, then it would be an interesting choice, but there is no other apple. This is it. So I did take the bite.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Cook.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Maria Risto.
Hi, Maria Risto, 85 Broadway. I've seen this project be of interest and a priority for the last couple years. I'm a member of the Transportation and Parking Commission. I've sat on the BPAC. I'm the liaison to the BPAC where we had a discussion over this. And one of the fallacies, I guess, people are saying, well, there's a path down there, or the Almond Grove kids have a way to get there. This isn't for the Almond Grove. This is for the people that live between Miles and Roberts Road. There's not a way to access this heavily used and very safe way to either Fisher or the high school or downtown or Vasona, or it's kind of the spine of the town, and we don't have adequate connectivity to it. And this is a very expensive project that we have tried to get a grant for in the past and didn't. This looks like a very strong possibility to get the design done, which would put us in line for the first tier funding of Measure B. This is a project that Measure B identified. If we don't think it's going to get funded, I don't know what we think will get funded, but this is really important. And it may not be the top priority on every list, but I look at the Bike and Ped Master Plan or the Safe Routes to School study as identifying a large number of projects that we ultimately want all of them. But it's going to be like putting a jigsaw puzzle together, and we may not be able to put all the edge pieces in first and then the middle. You know, if you find a section that works, you do that, and then you do something else, and you do something else, and eventually, my hope and goal is in 10 years, we have real connectivity in this town. If it happens sooner, great. But this is an opportunity to use $40,000 of the town's money to get $340,000 that sounds like our town engineer, Ms. Peterson, has worked very hard to make sure that we can qualify for this. We don't even have to qualify, it's non-competitive, to get a big expensive project paid for that we really, really want. And this will serve students getting to Fisher who otherwise they have to take University all the way up to Roberts Road. Well, University is not a great place to bike if you're not an experienced cyclist. And so we've got this great path where the people who live in Creekside Village can't get on the trail. People who want to go up to the high school from that side of 9 can't get on there. So this is a really, really strong leverage point to get a critical piece of the puzzle in our connectivity. And I would urge you to please approve this. Thank you.
Any questions? Diane Dreyer? Thank you.
Yeah, Diane Dreer, Arroyo Grande Way, and I bring you a positive alternative suggestion from some of my neighbors to apply for the $334,000 OBAG funds for other town priorities, local street and road maintenance, streetscape and, enhancements, bicycle and pedestrian improvements, transportation planning, safe routes to school projects, which would achieve 90 to 100% of the Safe RS January 17th priorities and the feasibility study for school busing. In addition, to apply for a competitive OBAG, March 17 staff report, Highway 9 is a major regional bikeway, should be part and parcel of the county-wide bike plan, as well as state Measure B funding priorities. And finally, have the new senior civil engineer do the design, first project to learn the ropes and develop relationships with other relevant agencies. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Next speaker, Marianne Gustafson Sawyer.
Hi there, I'm Marianne Gustafson, 590 Monterey Avenue, formerly also Creekside Village. So I lived there before I moved to Monterey Avenue. And so I have personal experience. I'm both a very active runner and a bicyclist. I'm on the town of Los Gatos BPAC, one of the commissioners. And I can tell you that it's very difficult to get from Highway 9 down to Los Gatos Creek Trail. I've used the informal path that's there multiple times, particularly when it's really dry outside. It's very gravelly, and it's very steep. It's very rocky, and you're literally sliding down there on your tennis shoes, and it's unsafe. And in the wintertime, when it's wet, then it's very muddy, and when you're stepping, you're not really sure what's safe and what isn't. So the net is this, is we have lots of students on the west side that are on the north side of Highway 9 that if they could get access to Los Gatos Creek Trail, it would be a way for them to more easily get to Los Gatos High School. Right now, they either have to walk down University to Miles, or they have to walk to Roberts and get on there. But frankly, especially for people in Creekside Village and some of those other little pocket neighborhoods there, it's really difficult to get down to the trail. And the other thing also is there's a homeless encampment down there. So by having an engineer, well-lit, well-maintained infrastructure there, it's not going to be an attractive place for them to go. And then finally, as Thomas said, this seems kind of like a no-brainer. I mean, the reality is that these are funds that are going to be allocated to the town of Los Gatos, and we're going to be able to multiply those dramatically with the Measure B funds, of which this is probably the only project that is likely to qualify in the next 5 years for the town of Los Gatos. And as far as the non-competitive OBAG funds, we have never qualified. So it's not likely that we will be able to qualify for one of those grants. So my understanding is we have a July deadline that we have to submit from the town of Los Gatos our proposal for the OBEG funds in order to be eligible for them. And it seems that a lot of work has been done not only by Lisa and Matt and by yourselves over the years looking at this particular project, which was formally approved. And so while, you know, I've got the bike pedestrian master plan back there. There is no shortage of great projects we could do. The reality is that for this particular project, for us to ever have the funds to be able to put that infrastructure in, the only way we'll ever be able to afford it is Measure B. And right now, we don't have a way to do that otherwise. So it just seems like that this is the time for us to make the decision to use the funds that we're going to get wisely, so that we can then multiply them and be able to stretch them to be able to have a project that the town really wants. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, that's the end of our public testimony, so I'll close that portion and ask and look to council for further questions of staff. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go ahead and ask the questions kind of brought up by the public speakers. And maybe I'll fast forward the question to maybe where I think the answer, I could eventually ask the question. So the bridge that goes over, I'm assuming that you've got it there, and you can't just have the other side is because you're trying to create bicycle connectivity. You can't have them riding down the wrong side of the sidewalk to get to it. So you need to have it that expensive bridge. So then if that assumption is correct, then have you thought of any other ways to make it less expensive, or would that be part of the design process?
That would be part of the design process. So the design process is also always to value engineer and, you know, try to get the best design, you know, for the best price.
Second question. So we did hire a new engineer, I think, is it engineer/project manager that's supposed to help us get Measure B funds. And that's an engineer that can do design work, right? But no?
This is a transportation manager that's going to be helping us get grant funding. They're actually not an engineer, it's more of the planning area.
And I think we've had this question come up before. So we do have engineers such as yourself. Can you design a project like this?
No. And if you want some explanation, that it's a very large project. It would take a lot of different types of expertise, including structural engineers, a very large staff in order to do it. And I can't think of actually any city our size that would ever design something like this in-house.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Jensen?
In a perfect world, hypothetically, if the council voted to approve these funds for design tonight, and then MTC put it on the list, and then we got discretionary OBAG funding from Measure B, how long would it take for us to complete this project?
Right now, with the Cycle 2 non-competitive OBAG funds, they will allow us to start design work. I believe it's November of 2017. So if we were able to put out a request for proposals, get those proposals in, we would need to bring that back to council for approval. Once council did approve moving forward with a design firm, I would say we'd probably be looking at at least a year for the design.
I'm asking for completion of the project.
Oh, thank you. So probably a year for the design and probably another year for completion.
Assuming that we get the $3.4 million.
Correct.
Which is not a given.
That's not a given.
Okay.
Any further questions? Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One of the speakers said that there had been work for the last couple of years to get this pathway down to the creek trail. Well, it actually goes back a lot more than that. Current Supervisor Mike Wasserman and I worked with Mount Sereno and Saratoga to try and make Highway 9 safer, and there was a lot of work done, and at the end of those years, Highway 9 was safer. However, and this is safer for pedestrians and for bicyclists. However, the one component of our thought process was we didn't ever have the money to get access from Highway 9 to the Creek Trail. So it's a lot more than 2 years. It's been a really long time. And so based on the fact that this has been an identified need, not only in the publications that staff referenced and that the speakers referenced, but in our community, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to authorize the town manager to execute and file an application for funding for the design of the trailhead connection, to authorize the town manager to issue a request for proposals, to adopt a resolution, attachment 1 of local support authorizing the filing, and 4, adopt a resolution, attachment 2, agreeing that the town will comply. And that is most of, but not all the words included in the town's recommendation.
Okay. Do I have a second? Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will second it for the following reasons. I've sat through a lot of VTA Measure B meetings at various different levels, and I've asked the question of VTA people, different VTA people, how do we get these bicycle and pedestrian kinds of grant fund projects? And there's a list of projects that the wording almost says it's only going to be those. And really the only way to get funds beyond that they would prioritize is things that help the county connectivity project. This is a county connectivity project, and it's also on that list. So it's like a double reason why they would do this. Getting it shovel ready also would allow us to jump ahead of others. So there's so many reasons that this is a good way to go, in my opinion, and it's far beyond a maybe getting the funding. It's one of our best chances to get funding for bicycle and pedestrian from the Measure B funds, which are so much larger than what we can afford and what the OBAG funds are. To me, so, everybody helped me out when I was trying to remember who had been saying this was a priority, and it sounds like it came from everywhere at different times from the Youth Commission. The Safe Route to School people are saying, this is a good project. Bicycle and pedestrian has it first, I think I saw on the list. So I'm, as I said, seconding and supporting the motion.
Councilmember Jensen?
So I'm going to support the motion because it is a good idea. It is on our priorities, and it's endorsed by the BPAC. It's on our map. It's endorsed by Safe Routes to School, and I'm a huge advocate of those things. However, I'm going to use this opportunity to make an alternate argument, which is we have a guaranteed $343,000 coming to us. We also have $40,000. So that's $380,000. We rarely have that much. We may not have that much discretionary funds in the future based on other circumstances. So I would like us to consider being creative in our arguments to VTA, which I've been on VTA, and I get how it works, and MTC, and say, well, Winchester Avenue is a countywide connector. Blossom Hill is a countywide connector. And if I'm looking to spend money where I can get projects that are done and not put all my eggs in one basket, I may want to take care of things that I can get done with that $380,000 rather than wait and hope that people are going to give me something that we hope they're going to give us, but may well not. So I would love to see us use money that we have that we can distribute around the town for lots of different projects. And I think with a creative staff, a creative argument, and with our new transportation manager, we can make those arguments that show that those things fit into the plan and get that money. So while I think I'm going to support this and I think it's a good idea, I really wish that we would think outside the box and go for more projects and think about the entire town, not just one thing that we can do in one place because it's on a list. So with that, I'm supporting the motion.
Okay. Vice Mayor.
I wanted to ask one question. More for interest, I guess. So if our design doesn't cost all this money, what happens to the excess OBAG funds?
So ultimately, we get that money. I mean, that's something that we would probably have to talk about with MTC, and we could probably ask them to reallocate it to another project.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And for the reasons that have already been mentioned, I will also be supporting the motion. And I think the discussion that we heard tonight is a valuable discussion that can be shared with our new transportation mobility manager. And I think it's also a valuable tool for the 5 of us as we do our own regional networking to ensure that if there are local projects that can provide that regional connectivity, that we reemphasize that to our regional bodies. So all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. It passes 4-0 with Councilmember Leonardis absent. Okay, we now move to verbal communications. This is the opportunity for those in the public who would like to speak on an item that is not on our agenda tonight. I have several cards, and I'll begin with Debbie Messenger. Thank you. And so for those that are first to our council meetings, you have 3 minutes to speak. The yellow light indicates 30 seconds remaining.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. I am here to bring awareness of the second weekend of extreme gridlock traffic on the east side of Los Gatos. I live on 16870 Filmer Avenue. The traffic on Saturday from 11 o'clock until 2:30 was gridlocked all the way straight down the block of Filmer from Los Gatos Boulevard to Vista del Campo from Kennedy, Vista del Campo to Harding, all the way down Harding, from Shannon to Inglewood to Kennedy to Gem to Filmer, from 11 to about 2:30. We were unable to back out of our own driveways to get into our driveways. There were frustrated drivers weaving in and out of traffic. I witnessed many extreme safety issues with drivers. And it is the second weekend, like I said, since the beach traffic has started, that this has happened in this area, since the closure of Highway 9. I also witnessed emergency vehicles on Los Gatos Boulevard. Los Gatos Boulevard was completely stopped for hours also, and emergency vehicles had to go into the oncoming traffic lane to get around the gridlock traffic. It is due to Waze apps, Google Maps, other apps that are causing people to get off the freeway and sort of do a grid-like pattern, thinking that they can skirt around and get onto the freeway quicker, which it really doesn't, because you really only go 1.8 miles and you're basically costing yourself more time than just staying on the freeway. So I see this as a problem that will continue all summer for the next 2 months, every single Saturday and Sunday, and I think I'm asking for it to be addressed. I'm asking the mayor and the council to approach Waze again. I don't think this is a Caltrans issue. This is a Waze issue. This is a Google Maps issue. There has to be something done. We can't live in our houses and be locked in our houses. We can't go downtown and shop and eat and, participate in our own town on the weekends. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, do you have a, Ms. Messenger? Thank you. We have a question?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I can't recall if you were the one that sent us an email. I don't think so. You were?
Yes.
And did you get my response?
I didn't send you one. I sent the mayor a couple of emails and some tags of what had been going on.
I responded to somebody, with an idea after I heard that the traffic was coming in there, and I looked at the maps. One thing we did in the Almond Grove was we, with some measure of success, put up cones and closed Tate and Massal. And I looked at your neighborhood. Looks like it would only take us to close Jim at Kennedy, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then there would be no reason for them to come in. It would force your neighbors, they'd have to get in the mess a little bit and then get to Fillmore or Harding to get in the neighborhood. So the question is that an idea that you or your neighbors might be interested in? Because I think it's something fairly easy we can do. I know you'd like us to talk to Waze again. We've talked to them over and over, and I know where that went.
Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, the police department, the first weekend, it was about 3 weeks ago when this happened, the police department came and coned off Vista del Campo at Kennedy and at Gem. just from all the phone calls that they received. And I think, but, you know, coning off would be a good thing. Maybe a no-through access sign on Saturday and Sunday. I don't know, that's another idea, except for emergency vehicles. You know, who's going to police it? The police have other things to do. I don't think it's their job to be monitoring it. But it is certainly something that, I mean, I would physically do. I'll put the cones out. I have no problem with that. I live right there. And all our neighborhoods would do that too. And remember, it's not just our immediate neighborhood. It stems from Shannon. It's probably about 15 blocks if you count all of the different stories on next door that are coming around Los Gatos and the whole east side. That's sort of all the, you know, traffic is being pushed off to that side. So yes, that would be a good thing.
Thank you.
A start.
Can I ask a question of staff? I know this is not on our agenda,
Right.
so we can't really
So we can't
discuss
have
it.
a full discussion, unfortunately, but if you may be having the same question I have of staff to just address the ongoing efforts.
Sort of my question, and I've seen emails and next door about this idea of putting through local traffic only or whatever the sign was, and that Waze and Google would take it off of their list of streets. Could you speak to that? Is that do you know if that has any chance of working?
Well, we certainly share the frustration of our residents and people coming into our town and all of the traffic. And we are looking at a variety of solutions. I think our challenge is finding a solution that's going to work town-wide. So if we were to do something for one neighborhood, we may actually just push the challenge to other neighborhood streets. So we're really struggling with trying to figure out how we can address this. So we're not finished with our analysis, but we are looking at the Los Altos Hills model. We're looking at something that may also be adaptable to Los Gatos, but I think our concern is while we may solve for one street, we might then have yet another neighborhood coming to us with similar concerns. So we're still working on this.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And so without having full discussion, Ms. Pravetti, as more information becomes available, we will make sure to push this out to our residents.
Absolutely. So if we were to do something, that for particular streets next door allows us to target our messaging for the affected streets, so we would certainly communicate with those residents and homeowners.
Okay, so thank you, Ms. Messenger, and feel free to contact us. I'm still getting through all my various emails, but it's an ongoing discussion that many of us are trying to problem solve.
Yeah, and it's just very briefly, and I'll leave. It's the safety is really the number one. We don't want somebody to get hurt or worse than that because of this traffic and frustrated drivers on our quiet neighborhood streets. So that's really number one priority. Thank you.
Okay, Bob Burke.
Okay, well, thank you again, and you called us in the right order, because what I brought were 8 ideas that might help. So while I speak, think of 50 ways to leave your lover, the music to that, and imagine it's 50 ways, although I'm not going to give you 50, to lose your traffic. First one is we can put electronic signs on 17 and 85 that tell the exiters how long it's going to take them to get back on 17 at Lark. I mean, not at Lark, at 9. And everybody I know who traveled when she was talking about, and some that traveled earlier on Saturday morning, told me half hour to 45 minutes is what it took them to get back from north of town back to south of town. And again, I live on Alberto Way, so I'm at 9 and 17. Second way, I've had situations like this with other organizations in the past few years, and we banded together, several of us, against what I'd call the offender. So the town could find the rest of the California cities who have this same problem with Waze, band together with them and file a class action against Google to stop Google Maps and Waze, because they're both of them. And the first hearing would be temporary restraining order. They can't do it again until the court settles the case. You might be able to make a lot of progress with that, because the cost to the town to fight them would be 1/30th, 1/40th, or 1/50th of the legal expense to fight it alone. The next thing is that the Google founders they all live around here. They're not very far away. So a public relations campaign to embarrass them into stopping this ridiculousness would stand a very good chance of succeeding. The town's attorney might have something to say about this one, but you could pass an ordinance that makes it forbidden to exit 17 or 85 to go through our city streets and then get back on 17 somewhere farther south. Your precedent is that you've been able to close the entrance on South Santa Cruz. The police could set up roadblocks and stop and ask people where they're going, and then just let them go, but delay them a little longer. We could organize protesters with signs to stand around where they exit and ask them not to do it anymore because of what it's doing to us. Lark could get closed east and west of 17, but then you'd still have people coming down Los Gatos Boulevard in Winchester. And last, the police could stop people at the entrance. Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Burke. I appreciate the fact that you are actually coming with solutions. If you have that in a list, you can share it with us.
I can make a copy of it, or somebody can make a copy of it.
Great, and if you could just send it to us, that'd be helpful.
Okay, very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Colin Corbett.
Good evening. Colin Corbett, 35 Bayview Avenue.
If I could ask you to just raise it even further. Thanks.
Good evening. Colin Corbett, 35 Bayview Avenue. I'm here about the Almond Grove Phase 2. There was recently a public meeting about the Almond Grove Phase 2, and it turns out as part of Phase 2, different from Phase 1, the underground conduit component has been removed. In questioning about it, it seemed that it was removed due to excessive costs or cost concerns. So I'm loosely related to that field, so I actually went out and spoke to a few of the fiber vendors, and I actually sent a note to council about this. So I went and spoke to Zayo, who currently does fiber along our streets, and they said, yep, weren't contacted, and if the streets are open, they have a strong preference to run fiber and conduit when the streets are open. In some cases, they will do it for free. So I'm not sure where the excessive cost component came through, because they said they'd do it for free. I spoke to other fiber providers such as Windstream. They also will do things generally for free. Usually they'll do it either free because they'll go and lease that conduit space out to people in the future to go and make that cost up down the line. They will also go and work out trades with the city. For instance, they'll go and do it as either a franchise for the city and then do trades like, we'll do this, operate it, and implement Wi-Fi for you in different places or connect city buildings, things like that. So I guess my main thing is, I heard it was very expensive. Turns out it's not, and I would love to go and at least have the town go and follow up on that. It also turns out that as part of Zayo, their main VP for who deals with underground construction actually lives in the town and is a resident. And so you could also go meet with him. He's here. Also in terms of the overall strategy the town has in terms of doing fiber construction, there are other towns near here that have great examples. For instance, Zayo referred to Mountain View and Palo Alto do excessive noticing, saying, hey, we've got the streets open, we'll offer you discounted or waived permits for doing this if you come in and run construction, and it's with the advent of what we're doing in the Almond Grove, where we're doing a 5-year moratorium on construction, digging up the streets, and having to go and fully restore it, the cost differential to go and do the work when the streets are open versus the restoration is about 7x the difference in cost. So my preference would actually be if we should go and do it ourselves, we could then go and lease the cost back to other people who want to do it. And we should also invite other interested parties, the Zaos, the Windstreams, the XOs, to go and run fiber when possible too.
Thank you. Any Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go ahead and ask a question. So we've thought about this in the past, and I'm trying to figure out how to ask the question. So it really comes to, why do you want to run fiber down all the streets? I would not expect anybody, if you run fiber down the street, it just doesn't do any good. You got to run it to each house, which means you got to dig up each one. I would expect fiber to be delivered to a pole and then wirelessly the rest of the way.
So I should clarify, this is not to run fiber. This is to run conduit that can eventually run fiber. So this is so that it could eventually turn into a fiber to either fiber to the home or fiber to other locations along the streets, allowing other people to go and lease duct band space or to lease individual fibers through there. If you wanted to eventually turn this into a
So my
fiber.
question is really, do we really need fiber to each home versus delivering the last half mile wirelessly? Or even a quarter mile wirelessly?
So,
think about how much cheaper that would be.
Well, so there's a couple answers there. When I spoke with Zao, they said what a lot of people are actually looking for is fiber to basically microcells. As part of 5G, they're looking to do lots of not what you would call a cell tower, but basically like a microcell where they would be more densely packed so that people can actually get that. Those will all need to be connected by fiber. The density of where you actually do the placement is, basically subject to where's their existing fiber, where's my cost to go and trench to other places, what has a huge moratorium or things like that make it difficult, whereas if it's already in the ground, that works there. As for, from an overall, capacity and connectivity perspective, fiber is still king in terms of overall perspective. You can actually get terabits of capacity out of a pair of fiber. Not that anyone's going to deploy $1 million of gear to their house, but you can also get 1 gig, 10 gig, et cetera, off of fiber, which you can't quite get off of shared spectrum Wi-Fi yet.
So we're starting to get into the details of this conversation. So what I'd ask Ms. Pravetti to do is if you could follow up for the specifics, so that if there is any follow-up that the council needs to do, that we need to agendize that we could do that. So.
Yes, and I believe we have a council referral based on communication on a similar line, and we'll be happy to share the response to that council referral to the council, and then we can certainly follow up with additional conversation with residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Corbett. Barbara Dodson?
Good evening. My name is Barbara Dodson. I live on Marchmont Drive. I'm going to be talking about the North 40 situation. The court decision about the North 40 states that the town must approve the project unless the town makes findings supported by substantial evidence that the project would cause specific adverse impacts, and there is no way to mitigate or avoid these impacts. In fact, materials in the record already show that the project would cause adverse impacts. Unfortunately, these adverse impacts weren't stated in the council's findings, and the court did not consider them in its decision. In a letter to you dated August 30th, 2016, my lawyer alerted you to the fact that the proposed senior housing in the project doesn't comply with the state's definition of senior housing. State policy requires that for housing to qualify as senior housing, it needs to provide accessibility, a special living environment, and services that accommodate seniors. Regarding accessibility, the project assumes that most of the low-income seniors won't have cars, therefore only 0.5 parking spaces are allotted for the units. Yet there is no bus service to the area, and Eden says it won't provide shuttle service. Seniors in the proposed units would have no cost-effective way to access low-cost resources offered in Los Gatos downtown. Regarding services that accommodate seniors, under questioning, Eden failed to provide specifics about any services it would provide. Tom Preco, the chair for the Los Gatos Community and Senior Services Commission, in testimony before the Planning Commission on July 12, 2016, raised these same issues. He asked whether Eden would need to provide health care, nutrition, and case management services, and specifically asked, quote, or will this be something that falls on the backs of the town? The town will likely have to shoulder any adverse impacts of the senior housing if this project goes forward. I urge Council not to allow the North 40 project as currently conceived to go forward. Please recognize the burden that the proposed senior housing will place on town resources. Generally, senior housing is placed along transit-oriented corridors where seniors can fully participate in their communities. Eden never answered questions about whether seniors living above the Market Hall would be able to meet daily needs, such as obtaining food, going to hospital appointments, participating in the town's senior centers, accessing hairdressing services, or in other ways have services available to them. It's easy to foresee and objectively state the adverse impacts this senior housing will have for both the seniors themselves and for town resources. Further, I would encourage you to review my lawyer's August 30th letter. I can resend it. In it, she gives multiple additional objective legal reasons why the project should continue to be denied. As stated, none of these were part of the judge's decision making since the council didn't list any of them in its findings.
Thank you, Ms. Dodson. I see from my verbal communications notes that there are others that'll be speaking to North 40. So I just did want to let people know that we understand this is an area of interest for many of you. We will be meeting in closed session next week, and at that time make some decisions, hopefully, and move forward. And when able, we will share that with our community. But as of tonight, unfortunately, there is not much more that we can say. Ms. Lampros, would you like to add anything else to that? Okay. So our next speaker, Diane Dreher. And did I pronounce it correctly this time? Oh, thank you.
Diane Dreher, Arroyo Grande Way in Los Gatos. And first of all, I'd like to thank the council members and the staff for your dedicated service to our town and your consideration of this very complex and challenging issue, the North 40. I was here for many months with you all of town council meetings on the North 40 when I heard convincing, objective presentations of data backing up concerns in opposition to the Grosvenor plan for the North 40. I urge the council to direct staff to find all objective arguments, including senior housing and information on health and safety in close proximity to the freeway, in addition to traffic, access to Good Samaritan Hospital. There were many such presentations. To consider all of these objective presentations and all the objective data that are available in town documents from prior record, council meetings, and other state codes, all to be prepared for application reconsideration. Thank you very much for your consideration of this complex issue and for your service to the town of Los Gatos. You have a lot of very concerned and dedicated citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Markeen Smith.
Hi, I'm Markeen Smith on Drakes Bay Avenue in the north part of Los Gatos, also near the North 40. And I've been listening with interest to the Alberto Way Trail suggestions. My concern with the North 40 is the health and safety and connectivity, which is 10 times worse than the Highway 9 connectivity, the connectivity on Lark Avenue. The woman who spoke on Fillmore, we have a family member on Fillmore near Jen who also couldn't get out of his driveway on Father's Day to come to my house in the north part of town. And it took him 45 minutes. He had to negotiate getting out of the driveway with people and then to get down Jim and then over to Cherry Blossom, and then he had to pick up something at Whole Foods. It was impossible to turn left because Cherry Blossom was packed with people, and so he was like an hour late to the party. And he had texted us, "I'm leaving now," And just, you know, it's basically, my suggestion would be if we were to proceed with the North 40 development as it is now, I would close the Lark Avenue entrance to the freeway and close the 85 entrance and exit, because right now, I mean, emergency vehicles then would maybe figure out another way to get there, but right now it's a definite health and safety issue, because that area is, it's an island surrounded by Highway 85, Highway 17, the Lark Avenue freeway entrance, and a very, very congested Los Gatos Boulevard on the way to Samaritan Hospital. And there will be no way for anybody who's not in the island of the North 40 to get there on foot, on bicycle, even by car, because there's no pathway there. There's no way to get there safely, and there's no way to get out of it for residents. And that would include the disabled people, who will be the seniors, who will need transportation in and out, which is an unfair burden to our town, as Barbara Dodson said. And it's also, there's going to be no safe route to any school at all, because you're going to ask, or park, because all the open space would be gone, and to even get to the nearest park requires crossing 6 lanes of traffic. I don't know. I was going to ask one last question. You talked about next week you're going to put it on, and thank you for having the closed session, but would it be possible to put our town's legal briefs online, so that we could see what we could do, because you're going to all be on vacation for the next month, and we could think about, town members could even go through and figure out the health and safety issues that we've all mentioned in the last 2 years.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Question, you have a question, Councilmember Johnson.
It's not a question. All the briefing in the case is public documents and available for you to look up.
It's public document through the court. Right, but I couldn't get it through the court website.
It should be there. Look up the case number.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Do you have the case number?
Off the top of my head, no.
Okay, where can I find the case number?
Actually, before
that's exactly what they asked for, case info, and that's.
So, Ms. Pravetti, or Ms. Lampros, if you could provide that information to any resident who are interested, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Smith, Councilmember Spector.
I was just going to follow up from what the mayor was saying, and the information that the staff provides should indicate whether or not one can access actual documents when one goes to the court's website. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Right, because you can't on civil cases, and I wasn't able to find any documents at all related to it.
Thank you.
So the question is, can we put the documents online?
Excuse me. So I know we're going to get several questions of that. So if you can make all that information, at least the case numbers, I don't know exactly what links and whether we have IT capacity, but if you can work that out, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Robert Wormald? Is that a W or an M? Okay, thank you.
So my name's Rob Wormald. I live on Mountain Charlie Road, and I'll just sort of put the disclaimer out there that I'm a Google employee, so in a room full of politicians, I'm probably the most hated person in the room today. But I want to say that I'm here not as a Google employee, I'm here as a resident. And I totally understand the traffic situation, and I think that in terms of giving actionable solutions, over the winter when we had all the mudslides and we had a whole bunch of shut down roads, I reached out internally to the MAPS team and I said, is there anything we can do about this? Because this is terrible. And the response I was given, and again, this is not an official Google statement, but the response that I was given is that as long as you can provide a canonical source that says this road is closed from this day to this day, or it's not a through road, that information can be encoded into maps so that when a route is calculated, it can say, don't route somebody down this path. One of the things you're taught early on at Google is that we build things that are designed to be scalable. So sending emails, sending letters, sending calls, whatever, in general, I think is not going to make much of a difference, right? It's just a huge company. It deals with billions of miles of roads, right? And I think giving an ability to put something on the web that allows Google, Waze, Apple Maps, whomever, to look and see canonically, yes, Los Gatos says this road should not be driven down on a Saturday or Sunday. That's probably the only way you're going to be able to make an impact. And over several cases over the winter, we actually were able to do that. We were able to get Mountain Charlie Road closed simply by getting Santa Cruz to put it on the website that said, this road is closed, don't drive down it. And then Google can actually take that, use an authoritative source, and say, this road should be closed. So that would be my suggestion as a private citizen, would be to, if Los Gatos could provide a way that it was publicly available on the web at all times, what the road situation is, what's open in a real-time situation, then Google can use that as a reference when they're actually doing routing.
Okay.
Enough said for me.
Any questions? So, Mr. Wormald, if I can connect you with Director Morley.
And I'd absolutely love to hop in
I noticed you didn't put your address.
That was, yeah.
Anyway, but if you could have that conversation,
Totally, I would
that
love
would
to.
be great. Thank you. Sandy Decker.
Sandy Decker, 45 Glen Ridge. Feeling terribly frustrated and actually shut out again. We are trying to do what we're having to do and what we have had to do as a community since all this began 4 years ago, which is really get out there, do the research we've been asked to do by several of you council people, and we've done it. We came in initially, we came back again. We came back when asked for more. Each time we were rebuffed, if you will, that it wasn't really the kind of objective information you really needed. And we, I think, have done a lot of staff's and your job, and we're doing it again. And yet we're still being more or less pushed back when case numbers not here, don't see who we've worked with before, and not a lot of enthusiasm over there about getting a real good roadmap to all of the information that we need, because we're working it. We really are. We'd also like to ask that now it's obvious that apparently we're not going to have our amended specific plan meeting in August, which we were told before. We're probably going to discuss this, but it's a little bit frustrating when we can't even ask the question or get an answer. So as I understand it, and if I'm wrong, if you're allowed to or not, please correct me, but now we have a decision. We have not lost this situation whatsoever. We're asked to do more by a judge who sees merit to our particular issue here, but he's asking for more information. So yeah, we're going to give you more information, but I'm not really sure how it's going to be applied for you, if you will. Right now, we tried to come back and talk about amended specific plan. That appears to be off the table. So we're told you're going into closed session next week, which is the end of this month. You're going on hiatus for July. You're coming back in August. And are we going to discuss in August the suit and come back with more objective criteria for you? Or are we going back to the amended specific plan? What is it you need from us? Because we're willing to do it. And that's my question.
Any questions? And so without getting into details, again, all these questions that we heard tonight, all very valid. Next week, we will meet for the first time as a council to go over the decision. And at that point, we will hope to have our own roadmap. But as of tonight, I have nothing else to share because I myself do not have that information. Unless there is anything that Ms. Lampros or Ms. Provetti would like to add on, there's nothing else that I can.
I would just acknowledge that this North 40 continues to be one of the most critical issues for our community, and staff knows that and appreciates it. We're in a legal process, so we need to respect the legal formalities, but as soon as we are able to communicate that roadmap, we certainly will.
Does that mean there's going to be public hearings on this again?
Those will be items we will discuss next week. I do not feel comfortable making any statements when my full council hasn't even had a chance to discuss it amongst ourselves.
So we'll hear what your roadmap in August. Is this what we're hearing from you now?
As soon as we, as a council, have a chance to discuss it, and I'm at this point, I'm not even sure. I've never been in this territory, and so I again look to Ms. Lampros and Ms. Pravetti. But until we, as a council, decide on how we will proceed, there is nothing else that I can share tonight.
So next week in closed session, council will decide what is the next step they want to take in response to the judge's order. If it results in further litigation, further public hearing, that will occur. You will, of course, get notice of that. It's premature. The decision's just come out. They haven't had a chance to convene and talk about it. With regard to the court documents, it's an easy search on the Santa Clara County website to search up the parties involved and find the case number, but we did that here, and Ms. Pravetti has the case number. It is probably you're not able to get the documents online from the court website. You actually have to go down physically and get them. But I know that just today we received emails from Ms. Dotson and her attorney, and I think you were CC'd on them, Ms. Decker, and we uploaded and provided opening brief, opposition brief, judgment, that kind of thing, by request. We provided them to Ms. Dotson and her attorney, I believe. So those are public documents, and they can be provided. I will certainly talk to staff about actually posting them online as opposed to just by request, but
excellent.
That's the
Thank
answer
you
there.
very much.
Sure.
Okay, that concludes verbal communications. And we now move to our other business, item number 8, which is Policy Committee recommendation to amend Council Policy 2-01.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Shelley Neese, Clerk Administrator. The Council Policy Committee received public comments and discussed potential timelines for applicants and/or appellants to submit items for Town Council agenda items and directed staff to modify the policy and forward to the Town Council for discussion. That concludes staff's report, and staff on the Policy Committee are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Council members, Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't know who will answer the question, but if I need a better understanding of how the proposed policy or policies would work in real life, and then maybe it's all fine. So I'm just going to make some assumptions. Should I be asking you? All right, well, you're in a big circle here. So if we have, whether it's an appeal or it's an application, so that happens, and then, so that happens on a certain date, an application or an appeal on a certain date, and then this proposal would have the appellant or the applicant submit the documentation to the town 16 days prior to the hearing. First of all, is that correct?
It's 14 days.
14 days, okay.
And that, remember again, typically the application's been on file for many months, so the applicant has already submitted voluminous information. If we're in an appeal situation, the appellant has made the formal paperwork for an appeal and any justification to support that position. So we're just saying if there's anything additional that they wish to submit to substantiate their claims, we would need it 2 weeks or 14 days prior to the public hearing.
So assuming that the applicant has already submitted their documentation, then this 14 days until the hearing, what I hear you saying, that's going to be a non-issue. But if we have an appellant submit their appeal, how would the appellant know? What you're saying is the appellant will already have his or her documentation. That may or may not be true, because they won't know until they have the hearing what the basis of their appeal is going to be. So once the appellant files their appeal, how can we as a town be comfortable that they will have 14 days prior to the hearing to submit their documentation?
Well, typically are noticing and appeals require a noticed public hearing and typically publication within the Los Gatos Weekly or other journal of general circulation. So we typically have a month at least between the time an appeal is filed and the public hearing is scheduled. So there's time there. You know, if, especially on an appeal, let's say, for example, something goes to Planning Commission has its notice public hearing, lots of testimony, debate amongst the commissioners, and a decision. So the appellant typically is very active through the initial stages of a development application. So by the time they're ready to file their appeal within the timeline, they've already heard the arguments. So then when they are ready to file, they can file. So they would file, and if they say, you know, we think the Planning Commission abused discretion or whatever their reason is, they could check that box and then certainly submit something later. We're just saying that within that time frame between noticing and public hearing, there's still time. And by our code, we have 56 days. So technically then the appellant has 56 minus 14 to finish their research and submit additional paperwork.
Now, I understand you're explaining the process, but I'm looking at wording for a policy. And so how can, as a council member, how can I be comfortable that the applicant or the appellant has the requisite time to complete their work prior to this 14-day cutoff?
So what we typically have very good communication with our applicants and our appellants. So we would say, you know, we're working with our mayor, and we've tentatively got a hearing date of September 19th or whatever the date is. So they then know what that 2-week window is. We've now set it. September 5 is your 2-week window for Alberta Way, for example. So that's going to be known. And then they can schedule accordingly. So I think what we're trying to do is just have some certainty and level the playing field for applicants and appellants to know what those timelines are.
And that's what I'm looking for also, is certainty, because again, the information I'm hearing is still a process rather than a policy wording that would give the applicant, not so much so, but the appellant, the time in order to get his or her documents in 14 days before. I don't see it, I don't hear it from you, and I don't see it in the policy. Then my other question has to do with the documentation that comes to the council and when we get it. I see that from other cities. Some of them say if it's in too late, the council doesn't get it at all. And so for your proposed policy, or for this proposed policy, when will the council get the documentation, and or will they get it? And this is assuming that it's too late. It doesn't have that 14-day window. What happens to the documents? Are they given to the council? Are they not given to the council? Is there a discretion there?
Well, again, and I think this council does a remarkable job reading all public comments, but I think our staff reports typically are published the Thursday before the Tuesday council meeting. So that's a known date of when the council receives the material. So if it comes in at the 2-week, and it says very clearly in the draft policy on page 2 that all materials submitted by the applicant or appellant must be received by the clerk 14 days prior to the scheduled public hearing. So the scheduled public hearing is a point in time, and then we would back out the 2 weeks. So we would receive the 2-week information, be able to address it in the staff report, so you would have the analysis that goes with it, and then you would be able to receive it the Thursday prior to the Tuesday. If the applicant or appellant or any member of the public decides subsequently to submit additional information, that's, we've never turned away public comment, but I think what we're trying to say is that we're going to be able to do better decision making if we're able to have the time to evaluate, as opposed to receiving it at 11 a.m. the day of the council meeting, and then being asked, as we would expect, a council member saying, we just received this information from the appellant. Is it accurate? What does staff think? We do our best to prepare, but when we literally have hours to respond to complex appellant or applicant, we're not serving you as well as we could be.
And so if something comes in after this 14-day deadline, it's still accepted by the town, distributed to the council, and is considered by the council?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Vice Mayor and then Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think I probably should listen to Councilmember Jensen first, who's on the policy committee. But this, I guess what worries me a little bit about this is, and maybe the question is, are we trying to solve an issue where staff, isn't sort of overwhelmed with last-minute responses? Because I guess my concern is, if we're still going to get things and that when the timelines we're getting them now, except now you're saying you're not going to do staff reports, so the council members are the ones that are going to suffer because staff's not going to try to do responses to them. Certainly if something comes in the day of the council meeting, that's a little more reasonable. And if you're saying, I think you're saying if it comes in after 11 the day of the council meeting, we're not going to put it in a desk item. Is that what the?
That's our current policy.
I
is
think
11
that's
a.m.
reasonable at that point. And then so that means that we aren't obligated to consider that information in our decisions?
That's up to you. I think this council does a remarkable job absorbing information as it becomes available. But because you need the time to prepare, we do have by policy the 11 o'clock cutoff. I think, I don't want you to think that if we get something at the 11 o'clock deadline that staff is just going to sit passively by, because we will be preparing. It's just what we've been seeing is this escalation. Applicant submits something, applicant, and it goes on and on and on all the way up until the hearing. And at some point, we just have to level the playing field and say, this is the deadline for all parties. Let's respect that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Jensen.
Speaking on behalf of the policy committee and Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong. What we were trying to do was address what Ms. Perfetti has just indicated, that we would have lots and lots of documents right up until the moment that we're going to have our meeting on an appeal. And increasingly, staff was concerned that they would not be able to give the analysis of those documents that they thought they owed to the council and to the public. So in trying to give them time for that and to give the applicant and appellant information about when we really ideally wanted something to be in, we came up with the 14 days, we counted it out, we figured out when the hearings would be so that people could have a reasonable amount of time in response to Councilwoman Spector. You never know how much time anyone needs to do what they think is a proper job. We were trying to do what was fair. But if you look at the draft, there is not a 14-day cutoff for all information. It says specifically that that information will still be accepted. However, the staff may not be able to analyze it. They'll try, but they may not be able to. So what we tried to do was say, okay, we really want you to get it in 2 weeks in advance. Then we can do all the proper analysis. You can have it before you. If you don't make it, staff may not be able to do that. But that's still coming to council, just like it always does. It's not coming necessarily with the staff analysis. It can still be considered as part of the appeal process. However, the last sentence of the draft says, well, it's not going to be considered prima facie evidence of meeting one of the grounds for appeal. In other words, we're not just going to say, okay, that's it without further analysis, because staff hasn't done that analysis. We'll have to have the hearing to go through it. So it's not cutting off any information. It's not cutting off a document. It's not cutting off an argument. What it's trying to do is say, we want it in by 14 days. That's ideal. It would make the process go better, and that's what this policy is trying to achieve.
And the only thing I would add to that, the 14 days, again, using the premise of past appeals that we've seen, is there have been a lot of technical documents that have also been submitted, having the time, adequate time to have those peer reviewed by appropriate consultants, so in addition to our own staff. So I just wanted to add that as well. So Councilmember Spector and then Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The difficulty I'm having is not with the 14 days for of the application or the appeal for staff to do its staff report. It's what happens after that. In looking at the proposed policy, it does provide that documentation may still come in to the town after that 14-day cutoff, and that information could go to the council and may be considered by the council. And the difficulty I'm having is that it sets up, in my mind, a scenario where the council gets documentation and the council may, or may, some people may look at it and may consider it and others may not. And then, even though I have a legal background, I actually wouldn't know what it means here, that it would not be considered prima facie evidence sufficient to establish a fact or raise a presumption. So if I were in our community, I would have no idea what that meant.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. So I appreciate you trying to push things earlier so staff can do a complete report. I guess I do have a little bit of trouble with the 14 days, because what I see part of the process is the applicants or the appellants want to meet with the council members, and I feel like I get sounded out, and then they kind of figure out what things to emphasize. So they don't really want to submit until they've had a chance to talk to council members. So what I see this doing is forcing them to ask to meet with council members more than 14 days ahead, which is actually a whole council meeting ahead of when we're actually going to see it. I would prefer not to have people asking me about things when I've got, all these other things to think about first. I would prefer to discuss it with the applicants and appellants and the community closer to the date and when it occurs. So my concern is this is now going to, I'm going to get a bunch of requests to meet and get everything explained to me 3 weeks ahead of time, which won't be as fresh in my mind when it comes. So I am a little worried about the 14 days. Hopefully I described the process I'm observing and how it might affect me.
If I could just respond to that, and that was a consideration of the policy committees as well. And one aspect of this helping in the situation you described is that any basis of an appeal should be based on the facts that were discussed and deliberated on during the hearing that it was being appealed on. And so what we are seeing is that the appellant or applicant meet with individual council members, then change the basis of their appeal based on those individual meetings. This way, the appeal is made, again, based on the documentation and evidence presented in the actual hearing. That's filed, and then they have their individual meetings, and their evidence doesn't change. There may be more information that could be submitted after, but again, that can still be submitted. What we're trying to address is the technical information that is the basis of the appeals be provided up front so that staff and consultants have adequate time to address it. Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What I think I'm hearing is that there are aspects, at least to me, there are aspects of this policy that could be very beneficial, i.e. the 14 days, but that there may be consequences Other than that, after that time, for some people, for Mr. Rennie, maybe in that 14-day, for me, after that 14 days. So I'm just seeing issues that make me, at this point, uncomfortable with the proposed policy.
Any other questions of staff? Okay, so this is a public hearing. I have no cards and see no one else who would like to speak on this matter. So without any public testimony, any further questions of staff and or discussion and or a motion? Councilmember Jensen.
Anticipating a 2-2 vote, I will make a motion to approve the new policy. The policy committee met at least twice on this with, among other people who have participated frequently in appeals. We discussed it. We specifically didn't address those items that are contained as in our code section as forming the basis of a successful appeal, because that was not referred to the policy committee. What we were trying to accomplish is to get a time limitation for all people, actually trying to avoid a manipulation of appeals, to base it on the record, to not be in a situation where there's a particular appeal where staff came in and actually changed a standard that was not true at the Planning Commission and then was true at the appeal. So there was a question about how could that possibly work in analyzing the appeal. This policy does not cut off any documentation. We never do that except for 11. Even if you don't get it in at 11 o'clock, we still look at it. How different council members analyze and look at things is very individual, but we do rely on the staff. This gives staff time to do that analysis. That's why the policy committee brought it forward. So my motion is to approve it.
I'll second it. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I do hesitate, but on the other hand, this is not reversible, so I'm tempted to support it and try it and see how it works, and if it's not working so well, I'm going to complain.
I had to laugh.
We look forward to it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No, I'll complain now.
It passes 3-1 with Councilmember Spector opposing and Councilmember Leonardis absent. Okay, we now move to item number 9, which is our green infrastructure framework. Mr. Director Morley, please no complaining, okay?
I will not complain, thank you. This is our green, as you mentioned, Mayor, this is our green infrastructure item. This is a plan to make a plan, so to speak. And as we've discussed in the past, our green infrastructure requires our stormwater requirements are getting stricter and stricter. This is one of those areas where we have continuing unfunded mandates, so requirements that come down to us to comply with. So as we're continuing to work on those, this is one that will require, beginning in 2020, public projects, private projects we're incorporating green infrastructure into now. In 2020, our public projects will have that requirement as well. So we'll need to begin at that time including this in our design, which means an increase in scope in our projects and therefore an increase in cost in comparison with what we might expect in today's times. There are many ways to treat stormwater, so there's different ways that we would incorporate it depending on the project. Most of it is catching the water before it hits the creek and treating it, filtering it in various ways to get the bad stuff out of the water in sort of the highest level terms. And then that water would either percolate to the groundwater or be released through a separate means. And all of that will be hammered out as the projects are designed, so each project will be unique. And have the various elements incorporated. So tonight what we're looking at is the first step, as I mentioned, is the plan to develop a plan. So this is the framework for our next steps. The framework tells us how we're going to move from today until the time of September 2019, where we will bring back to you what that plan actually is. In September 2019, that will be your opportunity to say you like the plan or you don't, and to provide comments on how to on the feedback on that. And obviously, we'll have our typical public outreach along the way. We work closely with the Clean Water Program, so this is the work that they do for us. So the Clean Water Program is instrumental in making this happen, and through a bunch of acronyms, including SCVRP and others that help us with our Clean Water Program, make sure that we don't miss the boat. One of the questions that this may beg is, so what if we don't comply ultimately in the long term? And the state does, in some circumstances, enforce. So it behooves us to be complying up front. So we're working in that direction. So with that, the request tonight is for the council to authorize the town manager to execute the green infrastructure framework, and I will close my staff report there.
Thank you, Director Morley. Any questions? Okay. Seeing no questions, I open it up to public. No one else would like to speak on this? So I look to council for discussion and/or a motion. Councilmember Jensen.
I'm just going to move right to a motion, which is to authorize the town manager to execute the green infrastructure framework as indicated in our staff report.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. So it passes 4-0 with Councilmember Leonardis absent. And we now move to item number 10, our landscaping and lighting assessment districts for numbers 1 and 2.
Thank you. And there's a number of lighting areas that we provide enhanced services to. We started this program on an annual basis. We do this on an annual basis. We started back in April, and then on May. This is an opportunity for the protest hearing. So should there be property owners associated with these landscape and lighting districts that wish to appeal the process, this is their opportunity to do so. And otherwise, the assessments would continue forward as they have at the same valuation they have done in past years. There is no increase proposed. With that, that will conclude the staff report.
Okay, council members, any questions? And I have no speaker cards on this also, so I look to council for any discussion and/or a motion. Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Moving to a motion, I'm going to move that this council adopt the resolutions contained in attachments 1 through 6 of our staff report.
Councilmember Jensen?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 0. So it passes 4-0 with Councilmember Leonardis absent. And we move to item number 11, which is at 106 East Main Street. Architecture site application S-17-13.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. For your consideration tonight is a continued request to construct a 600 square foot canopy over an existing patio on property located at 106 East Main Street. This item was presented at the June 6th meeting, at which time council requested additional information, including the lease agreement between the town and the museum and the town facilities use policy. The council also sought clarification on the space included in the NUMU lease agreement, and the requested documents and the town attorney's position on this matter are included in the staff report. Additionally, an addendum to the staff report has been prepared with revised resolutions that include details reflecting the town attorney's position on NUMU's lease premises. Staff recommends that the town council adopt a resolution approving the request to construct a canopy, subject to the conditions of approval and included in attachment 7 of the staff report and the development plans. This concludes staff's presentations, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, so yes, Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Looking at attachment 7, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Attachment 7 would allow the construction of the canopy, but the property, the property beneath the canopy would remain town property as opposed to NUMU property?
That is correct. It would remain common shared space that NUMU would have access to, as would the town and the Friends of the Books, the library.
And so if NUMU or the Friends or any other person or entity wanted to use that walkway with the awning, would they then have to apply to the town under its permitting policy?
I believe they would need to use it, they would need to apply as a special event permit.
That's what I was thinking about. Okay, thank you.
And yes, Councilmember Johnson.
So I'm not sure whether this was, who would answer this, but I'm going to get this phrase wrong, and maybe Councilman Spector can help me when I get this phrase wrong. There's a legal concept of adverse possession, where if I go and put up a tent on a piece of property, it's not mine, and I live there for a while, I claim it's mine. And legally that could be recognized or not. So help me figure out how, if NUMU funds and pays for a canopy over what's we're saying is shared space, that we don't establish an adverse possession for NUMU, assuming, where they assume we put up the canopy, it's our space, and we control it.
I think that for the concept of adverse possession to apply, there has to be silence as to the squatting use or whatever it is that's forming the basis of the adverse possession. In this case, we would have specific documents that indicate with this resolution that indicate that it is a shared space. So I don't think it would be defeating that possessory right.
Any further questions? Okay, I now open the public hearing. Applicant Jeffrey Janoff, you have 10 minutes.
Can I use this right here?
I'm sorry, yes, Councilmember
Madam Mayor,
Spector.
thank you. Mr. Janoff, just a second. Did we close the public testimony last time, or am I remembering incorrectly?
Actually, that's a very good question. We did. I'm looking at staff. We did close public testimony. So procedurally, we don't have a public hearing. We have a public hearing, but we don't receive additional public testimony. Is that correct?
So the council can make a motion to reopen the public hearing if you wish. That is discretionary. But
okay. So I'm sorry, Mr. Janoff, I'm spacing on our procedures, but yes, that is correct. We did close the public testimony portion, and so we will not be including any more testimony from speakers. So, yes, Councilmember Spector.
I'm going to make a motion to reopen the public testimony.
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Johnson?
I'll support the motion, but being the ungenerous person that I am, I wonder if we need to allow 10 minutes.
I'm not going to take 10 minutes.
Hold on, Councilmember Spector.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to amend my motion to open public testimony for a maximum of 3 minutes per speaker, since we actually did have this application last time.
It's acceptable to the seconder.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll call the question. It's specific to this motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And thank you for that clarification. Mr. Janoff.
Thank you. This won't take very long, because essentially we had a nice discussion with town council, Mr. Schultz, after my letter was submitted to the town, and we went over the issues, and I think we are in agreement that this is a shared space. It's a common area, like would be in any situation where you're renting a townhouse or a condo or something. Also, it's not adverse possession, because this is just like a tenant improvement, essentially. We have improved our space within the walls. This is just improving our space outside the wall in an area that we're able to use. So, I mean, it is benefiting the town and the public in that. But still, it is a very important mechanism for us and for the museum, not only because it's going to bring in revenue, but also enhances the town's ability to provide this type of space, kind of small venue space, that really isn't anything in the town like it. So we're providing something I think is going to be very useful for the town. I just wanted to make clear that that this is a shared space between the town, as I understand it, between the town, between the museum, and between the Friends. It is not an open public space like the Plaza Park or something like that. This is really designated for the use of those three entities, and not just open to the public any old time. We will be advising the town with a letter of notice anytime we're going to be using that space, but it is just to let the town know so there won't be any conflicts. But this is not going to be something, in our understanding, that is open to the public generally. And with that, we do agree with the resolution to support the building of the canopy in the north part of the building.
Thank you, Mr. Janoff. Councilmember Spector?
I agree, it's not adverse possession.
Okay.
But in any event, what I hear you saying is attachment 7, as drafted by the town staff, is acceptable to you.
Yes.
Again, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. If after NUMU constructs this canopy, if it wishes to use that for an event, right? I understand that it needs to make a request of town staff. Is that what you understand?
No.
All right, hold on just a minute. Ms. Provetti?
In the CUP, which is one of the attachments to the report, the CUP requires NUMU to notify the town in a coordinating fashion when they want to hold a private public event. So we would have coordination to make sure that there aren't any conflicts with other activities that might be happening. The deck in the CUP is referred to as the sculpture garden, and there are no specific requirements for coordination for just the use of the deck, only when there's a private event.
I'm going to call it the sculpture garden too, because I find the deck very ambiguous. If NUMU, when NUMU wants to use the sculpture garden area, it notifies the town, correct?
No, both the Friends and NUMU can use that as shared space without notifying the town. The only time the town needs to be notified is if they're going to rent it out for a private event. And that's when the CUP requires the coordination. If you would like, we could add a condition to this architecture and site to address that if you think that that would improve coordination and allow our other parties, such as the Friends, to also have the benefit of that coordination.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Mayor, going back to Mr. Janoff, so is it your understanding, consistent with the towns, that you notify the town if you rent it out for a private event?
Yes, we're going to do that, voluntarily do that, so that the town is aware of what we're doing. And basically, that was really our conversation I had with the town attorney, was about communication. And so we're going to let the town know whatever we're doing, basically, so that if there's any concern, we can talk about it.
May I go back to the town? But if I wanted to hold a special event under the canopied walkway, could I apply to the town for a permit?
Well, as the town attorney stated in the addendum, that is shared space for the town's use, the Friends, or for NUMU. So if we have an entity who comes forward to the town and are requesting it, then we would work with that entity and afford the same coordination to both NUMU and the Friends as we would expect in return. So yes, the town does have access for the use of that facility.
And that's understandable too.
Yeah.
And that's understandable and consistent with NUMU's understanding, correct?
I'm not sure I understood exactly what the town manager was saying, because our understanding it's not a public space in the sense that under the policy there's listed public spaces. It's not one of those. It is one the town has the ability to use, like the conference room inside NUMU is a town's conference room. but we have access to it also. So it's a shared space.
All right,
As part of our lease.
Let me then, because I'm thinking that we still may not all be
On the same page.
on the same page, yes. When you hear the term, it is town space, I am assuming that you are defining town by town manager and something she does with town staff. But town space could be somebody from the town, some organization, some individuals getting the permission from the town to use that space. So what do you think?
In my conversations with the town attorney, we talked about what the town space means, and essentially is not the general public. It is the town, if the town itself wants to do something, as town government would use it, not the town in the people of Los Gatos.
So I can't go to the town manager and get permission to use your canopied sculpture for my parties.
No,
Okay.
because really the lease in the first paragraph says it includes a deck. It's part of our usable space. We're not paying rent for that square footage, but it is part of our usable space, which is consistent with the CUP also giving us the right to use that space.
I just want to make sure that Mr. Janoff and Ms. Pravetti are on the same page. I'll be quiet now.
Okay, Councilmember Johnson.
This isn't really a question for Mr. Janoff. I don't want to get into a three-way discussion, but I do have a question I want to ask.
Okay, so if you
About
don't
the
have
same
a
issue.
if you don't have a question for Mr. Janoff
Okay.
and no one else does, we'll ask Mr. Janoff. You can
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so would you like to ask your question now, or do you want to wait until after?
Well, it seems as
contingent.
though someone else is going to speak, so I'll wait for them and then I'll ask my question.
Okay. Angelia Dorner?
Hello, Angelia Dorner, proud resident of the Almond Grove. I'm glad that Ms. Spector brought up this item, because my interpretation of the staff report and the recommendation was that when I hear town, I think town in a holistic view. We went through this quite a while ago with wanting to put up signage, big signage on the buildings, et cetera. And we went through a lot about what was really giving up town space that belonged to the town, which we as residents are the town. I understand that NUMU wants to be able to use it, and the way I see it is that it's considered common area that can also be used by the Friends of the Library pursuant to their lease with the town, and the deck area can also be used by the town. And I just, personally, I just think that it's wrong to limit it specifically to NUMU and the Friends of the Library or to town departments. I think the same use of facilities, of town facilities, that was approved back in February, I believe, that definition should be used at a minimum, because at least then it's other uses or other groups. If the Rotary Club or if the Lions Club or whoever wanted to be able to use that space, they ought to have that right. They have that right now. Why are you taking that right away? Also, I think if the picture shows that they're closing off that access area to where you could only get access to that area by going through the exhibit of the NUMU or through Friends of the Library. You can't have public access from the other area. That bothers me. If it's exclusive to them, then sure, go ahead and close it off. But personally, I think that it's important to keep that as public space. Canopy would be fabulous, but if they want it exclusive, then add it to the rent agreement and pay rental. They're looking at it as a revenue stream. Why aren't we looking at it as a revenue stream also? Thank you.
Any questions? Next speaker, Barney Davidge.
When I started this, I didn't think it was such a big deal. I just was trying to put up a canopy in order to have events and to enhance people's experience that come to the museum. When I looked at the lease, it said, and deck. I go, oh, the deck. And I know when we first applied for this space, I was told that if we wanted to enclose the deck, we need to do architecture and site. And they said, please submit an illustration of what you're thinking. So I submitted an illustration of a whole enclosed greenhouse. They said, fine. So I thought, well, putting a canopy is so much smaller than enclosing the whole thing. So I didn't realize we were doing anything unusual. And so I'm a little amazed by all this discussion about public, private, when our lease said it was our deck, and our CUP said we could actually probably enclose it. And I thought, what's the problem? But now I see it is a problem. I just want to have a canopy to create a nice environment for people to come to the museum, which we're creating a great product. And I wish you would all come and see how great this product is and how we want to expand on that. And that's simple. I'm pretty simple about this. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, I have no other speaker cards for this matter, so I'm closing public testimony. Councilmember Johnson, your question?
So now I want to ask my question.
Mm-hmm.
For everybody's reference, I'm looking at attachment 6 on our staff reports, which is the council policy manual regarding town facilities use. And I look at it and it says, designated portions of the civic facilities may be used by the public for events including concerts, festival, ceremony, blah, de blah. We didn't specifically in this policy put in Sculpture Garden Deck as one of the listed facilities, frankly, because we weren't thinking about it in terms of lawn or this space here or whatever it was. But given the lease language and the town attorney's interpretation, I would think that town means anyone who comes in with a specific special event permit can use that space. Is that correct?
That's our understanding. I think, going back to the overall purpose of the town facilities use policy, we were essentially saying that town properties are intended for public use, not for private purposes. Clearly, we have a lease with a particular party that does allow for private rentals, so there are provisions for that. But in general, town facilities are intended for
So that's
public.
then my second question is, I think that listening to Mr. Janoff, he did not have that same understanding. So I was wanting to make sure that the understanding is that I, as Ms. Spector was saying, I could apply to the town to use it if I want to have a party there, correct? Because it's a town facility. So then my question is, okay, let's assume that's true. I don't know whether the museum would want to do it under those circumstances, but if they do, they put a canopy up, and now I have the museum coming in for a request, Joe Los Gatos coming in for a request, the Friends coming in for a request. How am I prioritizing those requests? And I know that I didn't use the adverse possession as a specific legal term of art. I just meant once I put the canopy up, I figure it's my space. So how do we go about prioritizing that when it's equally shared by all?
Mm-hmm. So one option for the council's consideration is that we go back to the policy committee with a refinement to the facilities use policy that addresses this particular portion of the Civic Center campus. So that way we can articulate, and the council ultimately can articulate what those priorities are. So that way there's a clear roadmap as we move forward. And it would need to acknowledge the lease, and it would also need to acknowledge the Friends. So we could do it through a policy mechanism. That would be one option. The other is we might be able to do a side letter with NUMU to memorialize how that arrangement and what that coordination would look like, and that would assume that the town facilities use policy provides enough guidance for the types of requests that we might say. But I think we also need to remember this is an open campus, so if people walk along the plaza above us. People enjoy the lawn casually. Those are activities, and if someone wanted to just walk casually from our parking lot onto the sculpture garden area, they could. It's open public space. I think it's really when there's an activity that creates a perception of exclusivity, that's really what we're trying to manage, is that perception of exclusive use, and at what point is it does the town have priority versus one of the other parties? And I'm not the town attorney, but I think in general, when you are the property owner, you have priority over the use of the space. So that's typically how those things work.
Just kind of along the same lines, but we haven't heard anything from the Friends about this. I assume they've been notified, and do we have any kind of input from them regarding this application?
We send out standard notification to property owners and tenants within 300 feet and receive no public input.
Any further questions? Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm trying to step back at look at this, 100,000 foot level. So if we add a canopy, are we changing anything in terms of the lease and the use?
No.
This resolution doesn't do anything other than allow a canopy, and it's not closed in, and we don't change who can use what or anything, right?
That's right. I think we're taking the opportunity to acknowledge it as shared space, though, because we did, as noted in the staff report, it was open to interpretation. So I think by approving the awning, we have the opportunity to have a common understanding of it being a shared space.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Any comments and or any motions?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go ahead and make a motion to adopt the resolution in Attachment 7 approving this request to construct a canopy over an existing patio. I'm failing to see how this hurts anything, but actually, adds to, the experience for all in the area, I think.
Second.
And if I may make a quick point of clarification, please. The addendum that was produced for the staff report included a revised resolution as Attachment 10, resolution for approval. It references the conditions of approval and the development plans that are included with draft resolution of Attachment 7. So the motion should be to adopt the resolution for approval included as Attachment 10 with the conditions of approval and development plans in Attachment 7.
Maker of the motion, can you include that?
I will adjust my motion as so said.
Yes, Councilmember Johnson.
Ask the maker of the motion whether he consider referring our current facilities use policy back to the policy committee to include any consideration of this shared space and how it ought to be treated under that policy.
I'm willing to include that, although I would think that could be a separate motion.
Okay.
So I'm tempted to say let's not include it and do it as a separate motion, if that's okay.
Okay, and the seconder, the inclusion of Attachment 10, do you also agree?
Yes, but I'm going to assume that Attachment 10, because quite frankly, I did not study it the way I did Attachment 7, that they are the same.
There's a slight revision, and if you turn to the first page of the addendum that was prepared for this meeting, the second paragraph under remarks includes a strike-through edit of a whereas that is contained in Attachment 7 and then revised in Attachment 10. Just some further clarification on the town attorney's determination of the lease premises.
All right. I thought I was looking at what you were talking about, Attachment 10. Am I supposed to be looking at Attachment 11?
Attachment 10 is a resolution for approval, and attachment 11 is a resolution for denial. The current motion is for approval.
All right, so if Mr. Rennie's motion references attachment 10, my question is how, if in any way, does that differ from attachment 7?
The edits shown in the second paragraph of the addendum are the changes that are made between attachment 7 for approval and attachment 10 for approval.
All right, and this is my challenge. I don't see any edits. Oh, staff report.
The other places, if you go,
Page 1.
if you're in attachment 11 on the second page, the whereas statement that talks about the 11,000 square feet reflects the language that Mr. Mullen just identified.
All right. So if that's what Mr. Rennie is including, I'm fine with it.
Okay, so let's, I'm going to call the question on this specific motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So this motion passes 4-0 with Councilmember Leonardis absent. So, Councilmember Jensen.
Okay, so I wanted to try an additional motion to refer to the policy committee the town facilities use policy dated 8/3/16, which is attachment 6 in our packet, back to the policy committee for consideration of including this deck sculpture garden area per the terms that were just put into the resolution, attachment 10, and consider how that space should be addressed in our facilities use policy and whether there should be a prioritization of uses that's included in the policy for that deck / sculpture garden space.
Okay. Do I have a second to the motion? Vice Mayor?
I'll go ahead and second it based on what I heard the town manager explaining, that they, effectively they hadn't really thought of this space when they talked about it. So it seems appropriate to send that back for more thought.
Okay. Any comments? Councilmember Spector?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am assuming that the scope of this motion would do nothing to modify the motion we just adopted.
Correct.
All right, I'll support it.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 0. And it passes unanimously with Councilmember Leonardis absent. And that concludes tonight's hearing. Thank you very much.